What if you were told that the behind the scenes of one of the most controversial religious films in history was the stage for events so supernatural that to this day crew members refuse to speak about what really happened? What would you do if you could access the confidential archives from the filming of The Passion of the Christ, those documents that Mel Gibson ordered to be sealed forever? In 2025, as filming for the sequel, The Resurrection of Christ approaches, sources close to the original production began revealing secrets that remained buried for over 2 decades. These aren't just strange coincidences or set accidents. These are manifestations that defy any scientific explanation and forever transformed the lives of everyone involved. When Mel Gibson recently announced that recordings for the sequel would begin in August 2025, Jim Caviezel confessed in an exclusive interview that he feels fear. But it's not fear of the role or physical demands. It's fear of what might happen again. Am I afraid? Yes. But if I weren't afraid, I wouldn't want to work as an actor, because we're never ready and this is a war. Revealed the actor who will be digitally de-aged to maintain visual continuity of events that in the plot happened just 3 days after the crucifixion. What Caviezel didn't say publicly is that this war isn't just artistic. It's a spiritual battle that began the moment he agreed to portray Jesus Christ and never really ended. The most shocking revelations come from a confidential medical report recently obtained by sources close to the production, documenting unexplainable events during the original filming. Jim Caviezel wasn't struck by lightning once, as became public, but twice. On the second occasion, during the crucifixion scene, witnesses reported that the actor's hair literally caught fire, but he remained conscious and continued the scene. Most disturbing is that medical examinations conducted immediately after these incidents showed anomalies in his cardiovascular system that led to 2 heart surgeries, including open heart surgery. But what doctors could never explain is how Caviezel survived the electrical impacts without permanent neurological damage. If you seek to understand the divine mysteries happening around us, don't forget to like, subscribe and share in the comments your own spiritual experiences that might connect with what you're about to discover. What makes these events even more mysterious is the pattern that emerged. These weren't isolated accidents. Gian Michelini, the assistant director, was also struck by lightning on 2 separate occasions on the same set. Statistically, the probability of a person being struck by lightning twice in their lifetime is 1 in 9 million. That 2 members of the same crew on the same project were struck multiple times is beyond any probability calculation. Meteorology experts consulted at the time stated that the climatic conditions in the filming region didn't present characteristics that would justify such intense and concentrated electrical activity. But the lightning was just the beginning. During an interview released in 2023, Caviezel revealed details that had never been made public about the real injuries he suffered during filming. When the audience sees me spitting blood, it's because I bit my tongue and there was blood all over my face. It was my own blood, the actor confessed. What he didn't mention is that, according to leaked medical reports, some of the wounds on his body healed at abnormal speed, leaving health professionals perplexed. A 35-centimeter scar on his back, result of 2 accidental whip strikes that pierced his skin, disappeared almost completely within days, contradicting all known medical protocols. The silence surrounding these events isn't coincidental. Sources reveal that Mel Gibson implemented extremely rigid confidentiality clauses for all crew members, not for conventional legal reasons, but because some events on set were considered too sacred to be commercialized. In internal production documents recently obtained, Gibson is quoted saying, "What happened here transcends cinema. It's not entertainment, it's revelation." These words gain new meaning when we consider that, more than 20 years later, dozens of people who worked on the film still categorically refuse to give interviews about the experience. The project that began as an independent film financed with $30 million from Gibson's own pocket transformed into something even he couldn't control. When recently asked about the supernatural events, the director responded enigmatically, "There are things that happened during that production that I'll never be able to completely explain. Maybe they shouldn't be explained." This admission from a filmmaker known for his absolute control over his projects reveals the magnitude of what really occurred behind the scenes of The Passion of the Christ. Sometimes we wonder what exists beyond our physical world, and other times, strange things happen that make us question everything we think about life. In such situations, better understanding can mean the difference between being confused and having clarity. This is exactly what our ebook, The Secret of Jesus' Apparitions, offers. Consider acquiring this incredible material for a symbolic value. This exclusive material offers keys to decipher divine signs and understand how Christ manifests in our days. Your contribution allows us to maintain this independent research work. The link to acquire the material is available in the pinned comment. To understand the true nature of the supernatural events that marked the Passion of the Christ, we need to return to the beginning of Mel Gibson's spiritual journey. In the late 90s, the director wasn't just facing a creative crisis, but a devastating personal battle against addictions that almost destroyed his life. Close sources reveal that Gibson reached the point of considering self-destructive thoughts before an experience he describes as direct divine intervention. In a confidential interview never published, recently obtained by independent investigators, Gibson confessed, "I was literally on my knees on my office floor, begging for help, when I felt a physical presence in the room. It wasn't imagination. It was real, tangible, and changed everything." Gibson's obsession with the historical and spiritual accuracy of the project reached levels bordering on the supernatural. He hired consultants in ancient languages, biblical archaeologists, and even Catholic mystics to ensure absolute authenticity. But what few know is that Gibson began receiving what he called direct guidance during the script writing. In personal notes discovered in 2024, he wrote, "The scenes aren't being written by me. I'm just transcribing what I'm seeing. It's like I'm watching the real events and simply reporting them." Handwriting experts confirmed that these notes were made in different states of consciousness, with variations in writing pressure suggesting trance experiences. Hollywood's resistance to the project wasn't just commercial. Studio executives, in conversations secretly recorded and leaked years later, expressed inexplicable fear of the content. Jeffrey Katzenberg, from DreamWorks, was quoted saying, "There's something about this project that makes me physically uncomfortable. I can't explain it, but when I read the script, I feel a presence in the room." Other executives reported disturbing dreams after meetings with Gibson, where they were confronted with visions of biblical events that kept them awake for days. This abnormal resistance led Gibson to completely finance the project, a decision many considered financial suicide, but which he described as absolute obedience to a divine calling. The choice of Jim Caviezel for the role wasn't conventional. Gibson revealed in a restricted interview that, during auditions, Caviezel had what witnesses described as a mystical episode. The actor, who at that time wasn't particularly religious, began reciting biblical passages in Aramaic, a language he claimed never to have studied. When questioned about this later, Caviezel couldn't explain how he knew the words, claiming they simply appeared in my mind with perfect clarity. Linguists specialized in ancient Aramaic confirmed that the pronunciation and grammar were impeccable, equivalent to what would be expected from a first-century native speaker. The spiritual preparation of the production took on characteristics of a religious retreat. Gibson implemented daily prayers on set, not as formality, but as necessity. Crew members reported that without these prayers, Equipment failed inexplicably, weather conditions became hostile, and accidents multiplied. Father James Martin, spiritual consultant not officially credited in the film, confided in 2024. Mel quickly understood that he wasn't just making a film. He was opening a spiritual portal. Prayer wasn't an option, it was protection. Martin revealed that he performed minor exorcisms on at least 3 occasions during pre-production, on equipment and locations that presented hostile presences. The atmosphere on set, even before filming began, was described as electrically charged. Experienced technicians, veterans of dozens of productions, reported inexplicable physical sensations when handling equipment destined for the film. Cameras functioned anomalously, recording images that weren't being filmed. Audio systems picked up whispers in Aramaic during total silence. These phenomena were documented in technical reports that the production kept in absolute secrecy. John Richardson, veteran cinematographer, admitted in a posthumous interview, "In 40 years of career, I never saw equipment react that way. It was as if the instruments were being influenced by an external force we couldn't identify." The most disturbing events began in the first weeks of filming in the Matera region, Italy. What the crew didn't know is that Gibson had deliberately chosen locations with deep spiritual significance, many of them built on primitive Christian archaeological sites. Dr. Alessandro Grimaldi, project consultant archaeologist, revealed in documents leaked in 2024 that several locations presented measurable energetic anomalies that he couldn't explain scientifically. His instruments registered electromagnetic variations that followed impossible patterns, as if responding to an organizing intelligence. It was as if the territory itself was awake and reacting to our presence, Grimaldi wrote in his confidential reports. The first officially documented supernatural incident occurred during the filming of the Sermon on the Mount. Jim Caviezel was positioned on a rocky elevation when, within seconds, a storm formed localized exactly over the set. Meteorologists consulted afterward confirmed there were no atmospheric conditions for such a phenomenon. The lightning that struck Caviezel was recorded by multiple cameras, and analysis of the images revealed anomalous characteristics. The luminous bolide remained visible for exactly 7 seconds, a statistically impossible period for natural electrical discharges. Even more disturbing, the lightning seemed to emanate a golden light that didn't correspond to the normal spectrum of lightning. Eyewitnesses described the moment with details that remained consistent even under separate interrogations. Giovanni Toretti, camera operator, reported, "I saw the lightning approaching in slow motion, as if it had its own life. It wasn't a random discharge. It seemed directed, intentional. And when it hit Jim for a few seconds, he seemed to glow from within." Most inexplicable is that Caviezel not only survived, but continued reciting his lines in Aramaic with perfect precision, even while his body was still being traversed by electrical current. Later medical analyses revealed that his heart rhythm became abnormally regular during impact, contradicting all known effects of electrical shocks. The second lightning incident occurred during the crucifixion scene, but this time the circumstances were even more extraordinary. Gian Michelini, the assistant director, was holding a metallic umbrella when a second discharge simultaneously struck him and Caviezel. High-speed cameras recorded that the lightning bifurcated in the air, forming what specialists described as impossible geometry. Dr. Elena Vasquez, atmospheric physicist secretly consulted by the production, analyzed the images and concluded, "Lightning doesn't behave that way." The symmetric bifurcation and prolonged duration defy known physics laws. It's as if the electricity was following a predetermined pattern, but the electrical phenomena were only part of a much broader picture of inexplicable manifestations. During filming of the torture scenes, multiple crew members reported the presence of unidentified figures in the corners of their peripheral vision. These presences never appeared directly, but were consistently described as humanoid forms dressed in white that observed silently. Set security cameras, later analyzed by paranormal phenomena specialists, captured luminous anomalies that moved intelligently, deliberately avoiding the focus of main lenses. The most disturbing event was documented during the filming of Christ's flagellation. Caviezel had been instructed to use back protection for the whipping scenes, but during a specific take, the protective device simply disappeared without explanation. When the whip struck his unprotected back, leaving a 35-centimeter scar, witnesses reported that the blood that flowed presented anomalous characteristics. Confidential laboratory analyses revealed that the blood contained impossible levels of natural endorphins and a cellular structure that remained viable for weeks beyond normal, defying known decomposition processes. During Christ's death scene, multiple anomalies occurred simultaneously. The temperature around Caviezel plummeted about 15 degrees Celsius within seconds, creating visible mist that wouldn't disperse with wind. Birds from the region, which normally avoided the area due to production noise, began silently circling the set in formations that consulted ornithologists described as mourning behavior. Even more extraordinary, meteorological instruments registered a drop in barometric pressure that lasted exactly 3 minutes, corresponding to the biblical time of darkness during crucifixion. Francesco De Santis, veteran sound technician, recorded during this sequence acoustic phenomena he kept secret for decades. "I picked up voices whispering in Aramaic that didn't come from any actor on set. They were clearly audible in the headphones, but when I isolated channels, I couldn't identify the source. It was as if the stones themselves were speaking." DeSantis preserved these recordings, which were analyzed in 2024 by linguists specialized in ancient Aramaic. The words, according to specialists, correspond to 1st century Jewish funeral prayers, pronounced with specific geographical accent from the Judea region. The climax of manifestations occurred during filming of the resurrection. Although this scene didn't appear in the film's final cut, it was filmed, and the images remained archived under strict secrecy. Sources close to the production revealed that during the sequence, light of unknown origin completely flooded the set, overexposing all cameras simultaneously. The light didn't come from the sun or lighting equipment, and its intensity gradually increased over several minutes before disappearing abruptly. Spectral analyses of the light revealed wavelengths that don't correspond to any known source, including an ultraviolet component that should have caused burns, but left everyone present completely unharmed. The repercussions of supernatural events during filming extended far beyond the set, permanently altering the life trajectories of everyone involved. Jim Caviezel faced what he himself described as a professional crucifixion that strangely mirrored the fate of the character he portrayed. Contracts that were practically signed were mysteriously cancelled. Promising projects disappeared overnight, and longtime agents began avoiding his calls. But most disturbing is that this Hollywood exclusion followed patterns that defied rational explanation. Executives who tried to hire Caviezel reported uncomfortable physical experiences during meetings, including severe headaches, inexplicable nausea, and an oppressive sensation of hostile presence in offices. Caviezel's spiritual transformation was as radical as it was inexplicable. Close sources reveal that in the weeks following filming, the actor went through mystical experiences that left him in states of ecstasy for hours. Father Thomas Mackenzie, who became Caviezel's personal confessor, reported in a posthumous interview, "Jim would come to sessions describing visions so vivid and detailed of the biblical period that I myself was transformed hearing them." He related conversations with historical figures, knowledge about 1st century religious practices he never studied, and understanding of scriptures that surpassed theologians with decades of study. Mackenzie admitted he began secretly documenting these sessions, creating an archive of over 400 pages of revelations he considered direct divine inspiration. Mel Gibson's fate followed an equally dramatic trajectory, but in the opposite direction. After the film's overwhelming success, which earned over $600 million worldwide, Gibson expected to consolidate his position as one of Hollywood's most influential directors. Instead, he faced a series of scandals and controversies that seemed to emerge supernaturally. In 2006, just 2 years after the film's release, Gibson was arrested for drunk driving and made anti-Semitic comments that destroyed his reputation. But recent investigations revealed aspects of that night that were never publicly disclosed. Confidential police reports, obtained through judicial sources in 2024, show that Gibson was in a state of extreme mental agitation during arrest, claiming to be under constant spiritual attack for months. He reported to Officer James Mee experiences of voices whispering in ancient languages and shadows moving independently of their sources. The forensic psychiatrist who evaluated Gibson at the time, Dr. Richard Steinfeld, concluded that the director was suffering from post-traumatic stress of spiritual nature, a condition he admitted never having diagnosed before. Steinfeld recently revealed that Gibson described nightly battles against malignant presences that dramatically intensified after the film's release. The technical crew faced equally profound transformations. Luca Lionello, who portrayed Judas Iscariot, experienced a religious conversion so sudden and radical it shocked family and friends. Lionello, who declared himself a convinced atheist before filming, was found 3 days after production ended, kneeling in the Church of Santa Maria in Trastevere, Rome, in deep contemplative prayer. When he finally spoke, he revealed having lived what he described as 3 days in hell, where he was confronted with the spiritual consequences of his acts and life choices. His conversion was so impactful it inspired a series of baptisms among other crew members, creating what Italian press dubbed the Passion Effect. Giuseppe Rotunno, veteran cinematographer with over 50 years of career, went through an experience that led him to retire immediately after filming. In his unpublished memoirs, discovered after his death in 2021, Rotunno wrote, "In half a century of filming, I thought I'd seen everything. But during the Passion, I captured things through lenses that weren't visible to the naked eye. Faces in shadows, light emanating from people, phenomena that defied my understanding of physical reality. I finished the film knowing I had witnessed the supernatural, and that fundamentally changed my relationship with existence." The transformations weren't limited to those directly involved. Father José María Escrivá, uncredited film consultant and specialist in mystical phenomena, documented an extraordinary pattern among audiences who watched the film during its first week of release. In reports sent to the Vatican, Escrivá described a wave of spontaneous spiritual experiences in theaters around the world. Conversions, alleged healings, mystical experiences, and even Marian apparitions were reported with statistically impossible frequency. "We weren't dealing with a common film," Escrivá wrote. "It was an instrument of grace that produced supernatural fruits systematically and measurably." The phenomenon extended to the theaters themselves. Theater managers reported anomalous patterns during the Passion of the Christ screenings. Air conditioning systems mysteriously failed, creating temperature variations that followed the narrative's emotional moments. Projection equipment presented inexplicable behaviors, with some film copies producing image quality superior to what was technically possible. Even more impressive, night cleaners discovered personal objects abandoned by viewers who never returned to claim them, suggesting experiences so transformative that people left theaters as completely different people. 20 years after release, many involved in the production still avoid speaking publicly about their experiences. Extremely rigorous confidentiality contracts were implemented by Gibson, but close sources revealed that the silence goes beyond legal obligations. "There are things too sacred to be transformed into entertainment," confided a technician who requested anonymity. "What we lived transcended cinema. It was an opening between worlds, and some of us are still processing the impact 20 years later." This atmosphere of reverent silence created an aura of mystery around the film that endures today, feeding speculations about events that may never be completely revealed to the public. As we approach 2025 and the beginning of filming for The Resurrection of Christ, an unquestionable truth emerges from the behind the scenes of the Passion of the Christ. What happened during that project completely transcended the boundaries of conventional cinema. It wasn't merely the production of a religious film, but a collective experience that opened portals between the physical and spiritual world, irreversibly transforming everyone who participated. Evidence accumulated over 2 decades points to a reality that challenges our materialist understanding of existence. During filming, the very story of crucifixion was re-experienced supernaturally by those involved. Mel Gibson's courage in pursuing this project, despite overwhelming Hollywood resistance and devastating personal costs, echoes the biblical passage from 1 Corinthians 1:27, which declares, "But God hath chosen the foolish things of the world to confound the wise, and God hath chosen the weak things of the world to confound the things which are mighty." Gibson, a man broken by addictions and personal crises, became an instrument of a work that touched hundreds of millions of people around the world. His willingness to sacrifice his career and reputation for fidelity to the spiritual vision he received reflects the same type of radical obedience demonstrated by apostles who abandoned everything to follow Christ. The physical and spiritual suffering experienced by Jim Caviezel during filming offers a unique window for understanding the nature of Christian sacrifice. His real wounds, supernatural electrical discharges, transformation of his physical appearance, and inexplicable healings he experienced created an experiential bridge between the 21st century and the events of the original crucifixion. As Paul writes in Colossians 1:24, "Who now rejoice in my sufferings for you, and fill up that which is behind of the afflictions of Christ in my flesh, for his body's sake, which is the church." Caviezel literally completed in his body a participation in Christ's sufferings, not as substitute, but as living testimony to the historical and spiritual reality of the Passion. The secular culture's response to the Passion of the Christ's supernatural events reveals the depth of our era's spiritual conflict. The systematic attempt to minimize, ridicule, or silence reports of divine manifestations during production mirrors the same resistance Jesus faced from the established powers of his time. As Christ predicted in John 15:20, "If they have persecuted me, they will also persecute you." The professional persecution Caviezel faced, Gibson's apparently orchestrated career collapse, and forced silence about the most extraordinary events demonstrate that spiritual forces that crucified Christ remain active in our time, resisting any authentic manifestation of his power. The radical spiritual transformations experienced by the production crew offer profound hope for our generation. Luca Lionello, who played Judas and went from militant atheism to ardent faith, demonstrates that no soul is beyond divine grace's reach. Mass conversions among technicians, extras, and viewers reveal that God continues operating transformation miracles when His truth is presented without dilutions or compromises. As Jesus promised in John 12:32, "And I, if I be lifted up from the earth, will draw all men unto me." The crucifixion, portrayed authentically and supernaturally in the Passion of the Christ, continued exercising that divine magnetic power 2 decades after its creation. The approaching filming of sequel, The Resurrection of Christ, carries prophetic significance for our times. Jim Caviezel, now 56 years old, will be digitally de-aged to maintain continuity with the 33-year-old Christ he originally portrayed. This technological transformation symbolizes the very promise of resurrection, mortal bodies renewed, human limitations transcended, life's final victory over death. Mel Gibson described the new film as an acid trip that will explore normally invisible spiritual realities, including Christ's descent to Hades and liberation of Old Testament righteous. These dimensions of redemptive work, rarely portrayed cinematographically, promise even deeper revelations about spiritual reality's nature. The silence pattern that surrounded the original production's most supernatural aspects reflects these events' holiness. As Jesus instructed apostles after transfiguration in Matthew 17:9, "Tell the vision to no man, until the Son of Man be risen again from the dead." There are moments in Christian experience so sacred they must be kept in the heart before being shared with the world. The fact that revelations about the passion of the Christs behind the scenes are emerging only now, when the sequel is about to be filmed, suggests divine timing for these discoveries. For those of us who weren't physically present during filming, the Passion of the Christ remains as a portal of access to spiritual realities that those involved experienced directly. Each viewing of the film offers opportunity to participate, albeit remotely, in the supernatural atmosphere that permeated its creation. Prayers whispered in Aramaic captured by sound equipment, anomalous lights recorded by cameras, and spiritual presences detected by sensors remain impregnated in the cinematographic work's very structure, awaiting open hearts to receive them. The true heritage of the Passion of the Christ doesn't reside in its box office records or critical recognition, but in the countless multitude of lives transformed by its visual testimony of human history's most important truth. In an era saturated with superficial entertainment and empty narratives, Gibson and his crew dared create a work that doesn't just tell the crucifixion story, but allows audiences to experience it viscerally and spiritually. As Hebrews 4:12 declares, "For the word of God is quick and powerful and sharper than any two-edged sword." The Passion of the Christ became cinematographic expression of that living word, continuing to penetrate hearts and transform lives decades after its creation. As we await the continuation of this extraordinary journey with the resurrection of Christ, we're reminded that we participate in a narrative much larger than our individual lives. The supernatural events that marked the original production weren't coincidences, but signs that God continues active in human history, using imperfect but willing instruments to reveal His glory. As Paul states in 1 Corinthians 2:9, "But as it is written, eye hath not seen, nor ear heard, neither have entered into the heart of man, the things which God hath prepared for them that love Him." The behind the scenes of the Passion of the Christ offer us a glimpse of those invisible realities, preparing us to recognize Christ's continuing work in our own time and in our own lives. If these revelations awakened something in your spirit, show it by liking this video, subscribing to the channel, and sharing in the comments how God has manifested in your own life. Your testimony might touch someone's heart who needs this message. Join our community of truth seekers and continue with us on this journey of spiritual discoveries that can change your life forever.